A Little More Woodhouse Hall. By Sara Marks. 21st Century Austen 3.5. A short story collection and companion to Love and War in Woodhouse Hall. Right in my universe, the stronger the connections get between stories. The more time I spend with these characters, the more I'm surprised at the ways they connect. Not only between these books, but between other series and stories. Characters I thought I knew when I wrote about them continue to evolve, becoming different versions of themselves. I often wonder how Austen managed to avoid bringing her characters together with those from other novels and stories. Many of you know, 2019 was a very creative year for me. I had more stories published than I ever had before. I wrote first drafts, edited, and published 2 short story collections, 4 novelettes, and a novel in a year. With previous books, writing short stories was a way to keep my creativity flowing while I was waiting for other books to progress. I was sure I wouldn't have the same need to write the stories in 2019. I was sure there wouldn't be a collection to share. Then I found myself writing the stories anyway. It happened as soon as I got the idea for Poem Fling because I was writing about Jenna, the very same Jenna in Woodhouse Hall. I was simply writing about her future after this story. This collection is a mix of my wondering about how life would evolve for characters. Others reveal a character from another book has found a way to this one. A couple were written for the novel but were redundant or unnecessary. My personal favorite is the one about Adam and Amelia's war for the bathroom. It started because of a popular meme that I often see on social media making fun of college-age boys. You've probably seen it too, attached to some university you know of. It's an urban legend, but one that always makes me giggle. I've ended this collection with a little bit of Poem Fling. While I've not included the sex scenes from the book, I should warn you that the Yom Tov series is full of sex scenes. Even though it begins by following Jenna's life, the series is about modern, adult women and the men in their lives. This includes sexual relationships. If you enjoy that, please, the entire series is available. No, you don't have to understand Judaism to enjoy this series. As for the rest of the stories in this book, I hope they help you enjoy your favorite characters more. This isn't the end for them. A few will be back for the stash in 2021. Sara. Amelia Needs a New Home. By Sara Marks. A prequel story. From Love and War in Woodhouse Hall. 21st Century Austen 3.5. I can't take it anymore. I finally said. Why are you so anxious? Gwen and I were sitting on the public beach close to Steve's parents' summer cottage. The 3 of us had come down for the long 4th of July weekend. Steve's parents were so happy to finally meet Gwen that they allowed her to bring me with them. I knew, when I set them up a year ago, that Gwen and Steve would be perfect together. Meeting his parents only confirmed it. Like Steve, they were easygoing and generous. We had been there for 24 hours, and I was more relaxed than I had been in forever. That changed this afternoon after we had lunch. The 3 of us walked down to the busy public beach, set up our stuff, put on sunblock, and settled on our blankets for the afternoon. Gwen was the only one who wasn't relaxed. I had lived with her for 2 years and knew the signs of her anxiety. She kept adjusting her position in the sun, adjusting the umbrella, reapplying the sunblock, and taking her sunglasses on and off. I'm sorry. I just can't get comfortable. That's not true, and you know it. Just tell me what's wrong so I can help you find a solution. Imagine with Steve. What? I'm moving in with Steve, she said after taking a deep breath. When? In the fall. My head spun off in at least 5 different directions. I had been so right to set them up, no matter what Adam said. I knew something was bothering her. I can't wait to tell Adam how right I was. And wait, she and I were going to share an apartment. But we have an apartment and just have to email the signed lease, I finally said. I know, and I feel shitty about it. I sat up and bit and rolled on my side, resting on my elbow. This is what I get for being such an awesome matchmaker. You're mad, aren't you? I considered my emotions. No, not really. I like being right more. Gwen didn't respond. This explained why she had been dragging her feet about the apartment lease, why she wasn't interested in shopping for things we would need, or even picking posters to put up on the walls. You can't afford the apartment without me, she reminded me. Don't worry, I'll figure it out. Maybe I can still get a dorm room. Gwen only responded with a laugh. She didn't know me that well if she doubted my ability to get a dorm room. Does this mean you're going to rent a single apartment instead of a double? Adam asked me. We were talking over video chat in a Dunkin' Donut. The internet connection at the cabin was lackluster, and the network was spotty. I had offered to go on a snack and coffee run since I needed to be alone to plan. I had half a dozen donuts and drinks for everyone sitting on the table. I was tempted to start eating a donut as we chatted but resisted. I'm going to see if I can still get a dorm room. Maybe I'll get lucky, and someone had decided to get an apartment instead of the dorm room. Adam didn't respond. He just stared at the screen, his eyes looking slightly off-center. Amelia, he said, letting out a huge sigh, I know you seem to think you're lucky, but I can assure you that there are no rooms available. They're already adding temporary beds to rooms, so they have them for the freshmen. I could trust Adam to be honest with me, even if it wasn't what I wanted to hear. It didn't stop me from pouting a little. I'm getting emails every day about room changes as people come and go, but they're filled in almost immediately, he added and showed me his phone screen like I could see what it said on there. Adam was going to be a resident assistant in the fall. The floor RAs were getting information about the students living on their floor so they could prepare for move-in day and problems that could come up. He had been very secretive about what kind of information he got, insisting that it was unethical and possibly illegal for him to share personal details about other students. That means there may be a chance. People may decide to move off campus at the last minute or just go to a different school. I'm in student government. I bet that will help, I said. You can try, but you really would do best talking to someone on the inside of the housing office. Like someone who works for a dorm? Sure. Like someone who knows when rooms open and can tell them I would be a good fit? I guess. Like my best friend in the entire world who's an RA and would love to have me living on his floor? Adam just leaned over and, even though I couldn't actually see it, put his head on his desk. I knew the gesture well. It meant I had hit pay dirt and he had hoped I wouldn't realize it. Amelia, why can't you just rent an apartment? I can't afford an apartment without a roommate. I'm sure Steve couldn't either, but he happens to be in love with Gwen and wants to live with her anyway. Then find someone else. Everyone I know already has roommates in apartments and dorms. You should have signed the lease already. Should've but didn't. Obviously, Gwen avoided finalizing our lease because they wanted to do this. And you're not angry at her because this proves you were right about them as a couple? I smiled at him. He didn't need to be reminded that I was right. Think about how awesome it would be to have me on your floor. You know I can help you. It's Woodhouse Hall. I know, Adam. I remember your decision to take the job. Woodhouse Hall was the oldest dorm on campus and the least popular. I had only been in once or twice. When Adam told me he was going to be an RA there, I gave him the most encouraging smile I could, but he knew I wasn't happy for him. It wasn't like he was that happy to be assigned there. He had been hoping to be assigned the honors dorm, where we had lived for the past 2 years, and his girlfriend Mel would be an RA. When he had shared the news, over a tense lunch with Mel and me, we all had to make a list of pros and cons of him taking the job. Mel had tried to get him to quit, but I had argued, surprising even me, that these students needed him. Only Adam could understand the anxiety of a freshman thinking about how much they could or couldn't afford for the year. He had taken the job because I had made this argument. Mel, who generally didn't care for me, now liked me even less. It's one thing for you to suggest I work as an RA there. It's another thing for you to live there too. I've never known you to be good at slumming it, Adam said. I'm not some super rich spoiled brat. I'm not saying you are. It's the last year the dorm will be open. They're building a new one. I had been lucky to get on the campus committee to investigate options for a new dorm where Woodhouse Hall was now. It wasn't a real committee. The administration wanted to placate the faculty and student government association. The meetings had been nothing more than updates from the administrators and the housing office. It has worked, making the faculty feel involved in the process and giving SGA the information we wanted about campus developments. Yes, you told me all about those committee meetings. If there was a space in Woodhouse Hall, and I get it, I would be very appreciative and supportive of the person who got me said spot. Adam rolled his eyes. I'll see what I can do, but no promises. You know I adore you, right? Adam smiled, and I knew he would come through for me. It took over a month before Adam had any news. I was about to panic and beg Gwen and Steve to let me sleep on their couch until I found something else. Adam found me one afternoon in mid-August at my summer job at a cafe where I had been working since high school. I made us drinks and took my break so we could talk. I've kissed so much but my lips are tired, he said after he took the first sip of his coffee. From kissing or talking? I told them how desperate you were for a room and how involved you are on campus, but I did it. You got me a room. Yes, he said and sighed. I jumped up from my chair, wrapped my arms around his shoulders, and peppered his cheek with kisses. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I planted one last big, sloppy kiss on his cheek before sitting down again. Everyone in the cafe looked over at some annoyed and some amused. My boss, who was now working at the counter, smiled. She knew precisely why I was so happy with Adam. She had heard all about my increasing anxiety for the past few weeks. Adam wiped his cheek with a napkin. What can I do to thank you? I asked. You can start by helping me on move-in day. What does that mean? I asked. We need to get there to help freshmen move in. We have to leave here at about 4 in the morning. Then I need to sit at the check-in desk for a few hours. You'll do that with me. Got it. I didn't love the idea of getting up that early, but I was in no position to complain. Very little was being expected of me. You will come to my floor meetings and events. Easy since I typically enjoy your company. I reserve the right to ask you for a favor this big someday. Fair. Can I help you get your decorations ready? What decorations? He asked me. Name tags, bulletin boards, announcements, the common room. I don't have to take care of that. The dorm people do it. Are you sure? I asked, thinking of my past RAs who had been obsessed with making things cute. Of course, I'm sure. It's not on the list of things I'm responsible for. I was positive he was wrong, but maybe it was the difference between men and women in the position. Anything else? I asked. I'm sure I'll think of things. You're my slave for a year. I raised my eyebrow and said nothing. Okay, maybe not my slave, he said with a grin. You're my hero. I love you. I know, he said before taking another sip of his coffee. I could tell, from the self-satisfied look on his face, that he was enjoying being my hero and making a Star Wars reference. I pretended to be oblivious to the latter. I logged into the housing website and my personal account. I was on Adam's floor. I could see a floor plan, where his room was located and where mine was. My roommate, who had filled out her profile back in May, was a freshman named Jenna. She didn't live too far away from me, just in a different town here on the South Shore. I considered meeting her, but noticed that she posted that she was on a family vacation in Maine until classes started. I updated my profile, having not done it since I was a freshman myself, and sent her a quick message with my contact information. She quickly texted me, and we started discussing what things we wanted to bring with us and what we should buy after we get into the room. If my luck with Gwen was any indication, we would be perfectly fine as roommates. I was excited about what the new year would bring, even if I was in the last dorm I ever expected to live in. Do you want to read more? This book is in A Little More Woodhouse Hall, a short story companion book. Also read Love and War in Woodhouse Hall to learn how Amelia survives a year in Woodhouse Hall and the mess she makes there. Like or subscribe to this YouTube channel for more audiobooks and more. I want candy. Tell me about the candy shop you used to visit in the summer. Is it still open? I asked Jenna as we tried to fall asleep. Our beds were on opposite sides of the room. Our dressers and desks were pushed all the way against the wall so that there was ample floor space. We did this so Jenna could spread out when she worked on Adam's bulletin boards and so we could talk like this at night. We had just spent the day on the road eating candy with our friends. There was so much sugar in my system, even though I was exhausted, I couldn't sleep. It closed before I started elementary school. It turned into a drug den or something. They tore it down and built condos. I love the idea of a penny candy store. I just wish things still cost pennies. I remember the smell more than anything. It was next door to a hair salon, but it was one that catered to old ladies. I remember the smell of sugar and hairspray, Jenna said with a laugh. That's weird. Yeah, but I remember the candy smell the most. Was it like a mall candy store when you paid by weight? I asked. No, they had never modernized anything. It was the same way when my father was a kid, and we went there. You put the candy you wanted on a metal tray and the owner, this frog-looking old lady who would give me an extra piece every time, would count out what you got and charge you that way. I always loved candy lipstick, I said, thinking of my childhood candies. Did you ever have those flying saucer candies? Are those the ones where the candy was inside? Yeah. I hated those. I thought the outside was candy when I was a kid, and then you can't eat it. My sister always got black, licorice things. She would eat the jelly beans and any other candy that was flavored for it. I like licorice laces, but strawberry flavored. What was your favorite? Rolos and peppermint patties. Rolos are so good. What's Adam's favorite? Swedish fish. When we were in high school, the school took up on a trip to Washington, D.C. We took a bus for some reason. He and I sat together, and the only snack we packed was this massive box of Swedish fish that we bought. "How are you not diabetic?" Jenna said through her giggles. "Probably just chance. My dad doesn't like chocolate, so we never had a ton of candy in the house." "Did you ever try the fruit slice candy?" "No. We used to eat them all the time during Passover because they made them specifically kosher." "Do they make kosher marshmallows?" I asked. "Yep, with, like, potato starch. They're super sweet, but cover them in chocolate and they're amazing." "Why are they so sweet?" "Because they use real sugar, not corn syrup. You can't use corn during Passover." "I didn't know that," I said. "Oh yeah, Passover candy is always sweet because they have to use real sugar. It makes you realize how corn syrup tastes different." I heard Jenna yawn on the other side of the room. "I'm going to make you a huge candy basket for your birthday," I said. Jenna murmured something that I couldn't understand, and I realized she was asleep. It wasn't long before I was too. Adam's war for the men's room. Adam wrestled with the tape. He couldn't get it to rip at the freaking blade thing. It was twisted around his fingers and stuck to his hand. It took hair off the back of his hand when he pulled it away. "Fuck," he yelled and threw down the plastic spool. "Adam," he heard Amelia call from the other side of the door. "What? What are you doing in there?" she said in her sing-song voice. "I'm in the men's room, Amelia." "What do you think I'm doing?" "You have your own bathroom." "Is anyone else there?" "No." The door swung open, and his friend pranced in as if she had every right to be there. "What are you really doing?" she asked, picking up the plastic container of tape. "The dorm supervisors told us they were having problems with the pipes clogging in the men's room." "Well, a BM can be pretty powerful for a water-conserving toilet. It's to be expected." "Not the toilets." Amelia smirked and looked at the showers. "A man has to do what a man has to do," she said, trying to restrain her laughter. "How many men live on this floor?" "What are you going to do with the tape?" "I have signs asking them to refrain from self-pleasure in the showers." He gave her a moment to laugh, which she did, quickly running out of air and having to take a breath before continuing to laugh. "Where else do you expect them to release their frustrations?" she finally asked, now at the hiccup phase of her laughter. "Not in the showers." Amelia gently took the papers out of his hands. Adam was pretty impressed with his signs reminding the men that masturbation in the showers was a violation of the code of conduct for Woodhouse Hall, that increased maintenance only increased the cost of the dorms, that he simply didn't want them to masturbate in the shower. He was also pleased that he let them know he was open to their questions. What he wasn't impressed or pleased with was Amelia's giggles, but she was adorable, and her blonde curls bounced as she continued. "You know this is an urban legend, right?" Amelia asked. "No, it's not. We discussed it at our meeting." "Yes, but how are pipes not equipped to handle semen? How often has maintenance been called to these bathrooms? If the toilets can handle us, so can the showers." "It's a violation of the code of conduct," Adam said, pointing to the line on the sign. "What code of conduct? How could it violate anything? Would you rather masturbate in your room, where your roommate could walk in, or in a shower with a curtain between you and the world?" Adam knew she had a point, but all the guys were doing it, not one or two. He was a guy, he knew guys. You can search online for it. There are pictures of signs just like yours, she smiled, handing back the flyers and walking out of the bathroom with his tape. People just Photoshop the logo and name of the university over another one. Adam followed her. How do you know? Adam asked, trying to keep up with Amelia as she walked back to her room. Snopes, dude. Look, I know you love to put up signs, but this one isn't a real issue. Put them in the recycling, search Google, and send the results to the out-of-touch dorm supervisors, so they know this is a bunch of BS. How do you know about this sign? Student government always has someone coming to us to complain about it. Every year someone puts this sign up in at least one men's room on campus. We tell the poor boy to ignore it. I feel like I should have something posted on our social media about it, but that would probably humiliate someone. I don't believe you. Give me my tape back. No. Yes. Adam said, trying to grab the dispenser back. If you put up those signs, I will go door to door with Jenna and tell every boy on this floor to ignore it and masturbate to their heart's content. You'll embarrass Jenna. Probably. I wonder if she'd do it if I got her drunk. Amelia, you're not the floor's RA. You told me that, as part of my thank you for getting me a room, I'm your backup. You're always the first one to confirm information before you act. I know these people are frustrating, but that's what it means to be the RA. You're acting like a reactive douche canoe. My job is to set you straight. Adam didn't react. Fine, she said, rolling her eyes. You can get your tape in 30 minutes after you calm down. Adam stomped out of the room and back to his, hoping he had more tape. He didn't close his door all the way as he searched his desk for another roll of tape. Hey, Adam, he heard Jenna say. He turned to see Amelia's roommate looking exhausted but still smiling. He realized he had a chance to use Jenna before Amelia did. Jenna, he said, putting a smile on his face. I need a favor. Amelia stole my tape, and I need to put up some signs in the men's room. I could add it to the bulletin board if you want, Jenna said as she walked into his room and went over to his bed where the signs were sitting. He watched as she read one, and her smile fell. Or maybe not, she said. It's a problem. Is it? She asked. You sound like Amelia. Jenna shrugged. I have to get her back for preventing me from doing my job. She said she'll make you go around with her and tell the guys to ignore the signs, Adam said. Jenna scrunched up her nose as she thought about that idea. She said she'd get you drunk if you resisted, he added. Jenna rolled her eyes. Let's put them in the women's room. Jenna said. That will teach her. She didn't even wait for a reply before leaving the room, but she was back within 90 seconds, cute washi tape in hand. Women will pay attention to cute tape, Jenna said, showing him the winter snow pattern on it. The two of them made their way to the women's room, and Jenna took the signs in to put up. It took her less than a minute to put each of them up in the toilet and shower stalls. She was putting a cap on a black marker that he hadn't noticed she had with her. What did you do? He asked. Jenna laughed in a way that made him think she had spent too much time with Amelia. It was slightly maniacal. I made sure everyone knew the message was for her. The two split up, going back to their respective rooms. Adam wasn't sure what Jenna had done, exactly, but he was positive he would find out before the day was over. Adam wasn't happy when he got back to his room after dinner. Mel hadn't wanted to go anywhere, even though it was date night. He convinced her to order a pizza before they had a fight when he told her about the signs. It's a fucking urban legend, Adam, she said. Amelia pointed that out, too. Fucking Amelia again. Why is it always about her? She's my oldest and best friend. I'm your girlfriend. You don't talk about me like you talk about her. This wasn't the first time they had this fight, and he was sure it would happen again before they finally broke up. He wouldn't be surprised if something about Amelia was why they broke up. Mel had never liked Amelia and got angry when the two of them agreed on anything. He went back to Woodhouse after Mel had stopped ranting about Amelia. He opened the door to see a folded piece of paper that had been slipped under his door. It read, in black marker, "This means war." He opened to find his sign with, in Jenna's handwriting, an added note, "I'm talking to you, Amelia." He pulled out his phone and sent a simple text to his best friend, "Bring it on." She did, by the next afternoon. He came back from his morning classes to find a large sign posted with duct tape next to the floor's bulletin board. Amelia must have had it professionally printed from a large roll of paper. He was sure she had a friend in the printing office who could do this for her, but that was still pretty quick. It had a simple message, "Hey guys, don't listen to Adam. Masturbate in the showers as often as you want. Love, the ladies of Woodhouse Hall." Adam weighed his options and went over to Amelia and Jenna's room. "She's not here, but that sign is amazing," Jenna said when she opened the door. "We need to do something." Jenna laughed. "On what planet do you think you'll win?" She made a list of ways she could keep this going. She's willing to replace war for Woodhouse signs with something about the showers. She's convinced she can get all the guys on campus to protest. Adam rolled his eyes. Amelia was probably right and was always willing to go to extreme lengths to prove she's right. Adam grabbed a piece of paper from Amelia's printer and left her a simple note, "Ceasefire in exchange for my tape." He went back to his room, making sure to take down the sign and stuff it into the recycling bin before going into his room. A few hours later, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find Amelia, her hand outstretched with his tape dispenser in her hand. "Your terms are accepted and the war is over, just admit that I'm right." Adam rolled his eyes. "Fine, you're right." Amelia smiled, and her face lit up before she turned away and sauntered back to her room. "I just want to help. Welcome to the new Woodhouse Hall." That's what the banner said at the entrance to the dorm. I had spent days making the sign, allowed to move in early so I could spread out and make the sign. I was more than happy to do it since not only do I love this stuff, but loving my mother sometimes meant not being around her. After I painted the sign, I got my floor ready for the residents. I did the things I remember Adam struggling to do, the doors, the bulletin board, and the rules. I thought back to my freshman year when he had come into the room I was sharing with Amelia, hours after I had moved in, completely panicked. I remember him looking at her like she was the only one who could solve his problems. I quickly learned that she was. Amelia is a problem solver and a problem maker. I would later learn about the problem maker bit. I had scoured Pinterest for ideas on what to do for decorations. Nothing was up to my standards, and I found myself looking back on the decorations I had done during my freshman year. I didn't want to repeat too many. I used our school mascot, the gamecock, as the theme for all the floor decorations. I found my way to the education department, where they had a die-cut machine for teachers who needed to make their own classroom tools. I was in heaven and considered changing my major again. When I sent Amelia a text about it, she reminded me that it was my senior year. If I still wanted to do this at the end of the year, I could get a master's degree. I did a walk-through of the floor. I had 10 minutes before the first freshman would arrive. They would take all day, have orientation tomorrow, and any returning students would come over the weekend. Woodhouse Hall was brand new, but the family had negotiated to make sure there was one floor dedicated to the freshmen who needed affordable housing. I was picked to be the resident assistant for the floor. I knew why, and I was fine with it. Not only had I been a freshman in the old Woodhouse Hall, but I had been a vital member of the team that had fought to maintain affordable housing for the campus. Also, Amelia worked for the Woodhouse family, and Adam still knew people in the housing office. I had been an RA for a freshman floor of 2 other dorms in the past. I was good with freshmen. I remember what that year had been like, and I had one of the best RAs to help me get through it. I went back to my room when I heard the elevator start to move down to the first floor. I kept my door open, but we had been asked to give the families some time to move in before we introduced ourselves. I sat in my room, my desk facing the door so people could see me while I did any work, and went over the list of residents. I had access to their personal profiles, full of the details they had felt were essential for their roommate and me to know. I had skimmed, but now I looked closer, and one person caught my eye. Her name was Lydia, and the picture showed a redhead with a big smile spread across her face. This was the photo for her ID card. She looked older than the average freshman, and when I looked at her details, I realized she wasn't average or a freshman. She had been kicked out of a school in Georgia a few years ago, been through trauma, she put it in quotes on her profile. She had taken time off and then gotten her AA degree before transferring up here. She had supportive friends in the region and wanted a small college to finish her degree. She even mentioned she was a member of the Phi Alpha Pi sorority. I sent Kaylee a quick text to see if she knew anything about Lydia. I didn't expect a quick reply. She was moving into an apartment today with her sorority sisters. The day passed quickly, a few tears were shed, and a few fights came to a head for the freshmen and their families. I reassured parents that their children would be fine without them. I reassured children that they would survive without their parents. I was given EpiPens to keep in our first aid kit for allergy emergencies. I was asked for and said no to personal text updates. One father asked me to take pictures of his son every day and post them to a Facebook group. I politely said I wasn't allowed to do that, but in my head, I wondered what kind of preschool they thought this was. By the time I fell asleep, I was feeling confident that these freshmen would survive the year. I brought the pizza up to the floor's common room as soon as it was delivered. The freshmen were already trickling in, exhausted from the last day of orientation and the emotions of their parents' departures. Tomorrow other people would move into the dorm, but not on our floor. My job now was to help them feel relaxed and at home before their classes began. Pizza was something that always seemed to work. I had a secret motive. I wanted to see the dynamic between people. If past years had been any indication, floor events were an excellent chance to see how people interacted. You could see which roommates were getting along, which were already at war, who was struggling with homesickness, who was making friends quickly, who preferred introversion, they might not even show up, and anything else that would help me support them. The elevator door opened, and I heard a loud, feminine laugh coming from the common room. I came in to find one redhead surrounded by freshman boys, the other girls sitting on their own, glaring at her. I hadn't met Lydia yet. Her roommate, Patty, had been alone when I came by to meet them. I looked over at Patty. She was sitting alone, looking torn as she glanced over at Lydia and the group of glaring girls. "Pizza's here," I said and laid out the boxes for food preferences. They all rushed up to the table full of pizza boxes and grabbed what they could. More people started coming in. Clearly, the smell of pizza had served as the lure I had hoped for. I gave everyone time to eat, watching Lydia continue to sit among the boys and the other girls staying away from them. As others came in, the dynamic continued to grow. I went over to Patty, who was one of the few people sitting alone. "How was orientation?" I asked her when I sat down. She let out a deep, exhausted sigh. "Confusing. I can answer, like, any questions. I know how overwhelming orientation can be, you know?" I said and gave her a big smile. "I asked Lydia some questions," she said, her eyes darting back over to her giggling roommate. "She said she's been a freshman before, and all I needed to do was focus on making tons of friends and maybe find a guy to treat me like a goddess." I quickly flashed back to my own first week on campus, and Amelia's initial plan to set me up with a boyfriend, like it was the answer to all my problems. Her intentions had been good, but her execution had turned into a disaster. I watched Lydia for a few moments and recognized that she was nothing like Amelia. Lydia was a classic extrovert who liked being the center of attention. She lacked Amelia's diplomacy and ability to draw everyone in, not just men. "Do you want a boyfriend?" I asked Patty, sensing she was holding something back. She turned to face me and gave me a lopsided smile. "Yes, I'm not interested in a boyfriend." I debated pushing her for more clarity. Did she want a girlfriend, boyfriend, or nobody? Did she simply not want a relationship now because she had other things to focus on? I let it sit there. She had chosen her words, and she would tell me more if she wanted. "You don't have to do what Lydia says," I reminded her, focusing on the more important issue. "This is your chance to find what's right for you both academically and socially. Guys are always coming by, and she keeps introducing them to me. She says she's sworn off guys for a while, but they're always there." "I think she's inviting them to meet me," Patty whispered, her eyes checking the spot where Lydia was still giggling. "Did you tell her that you're uncomfortable?" I asked, leaning in and lowering my voice so only she could hear me. "No, I don't know how." I nodded, remembering my own reluctance to tell Amelia the truth that year. I had met someone I wanted to be with, but Amelia was so sure that I followed her lead rather than listening to my instinct. "Can you talk to her?" Patty asked. I considered the request. It would give me the chance to finally speak to Lydia. "Just this once, but I want you to practice telling her what you want. Do it with little things." Patty sighed again and nodded. I gave her a smile and went to chat with another resident. Lydia was the one thing they all wanted to talk about. She had been giving them all advice about different things like dealing with their roommates and homesickness. The advice was often unwanted or unhelpful, leaving the girls feeling annoyed and angry. This, not that she was surrounded by the men, was the root of the tension in the room. I wondered if Lydia thought there was no RA to help people. I got back to my room that night and debated about what to do next. I needed advice and sent a message to both Adam and Amelia to meet for breakfast the next morning. They both made a point of being available to me during move-in week. I liked being able to work through the floor's issues with them together. Now I had a crucial reason to get Amelia's help. Sally's best life. I stood there, looking at the three-story modern office complex with its glass walls and full parking lot. I decided to stop setting up expectations for what this publishing company would be like. I had fantasized about this interview for days, ever since Emma Shaw called me for the phone interview. I knew who Emma Shaw was, mostly because she was married to Frederick Wentworth. They were a frequent topic on gossip blogs that were my guilty pleasure. I liked talking to her, but still imagined her to be tall and elegant like she would appear at premieres and parties. The gossip blogs loved to watch her because she had an excellent sense of style and was kind to them. Plus, when they discovered how much she inspired Frederick's writing, they decided to learn as much as they could about her. Even I had a fangirl moment on the phone call when I realized working for her could give me access to people I never imagined I'd meet. My expectation of her framed my hope for the job as a cover designer for their books. I expected a high rise in downtown Los Angeles with people in suits and important literary people wandering around. I had researched their authors and learned the role Emma had played in shaping this publishing company as a major player in the industry. My mother was thrilled because of their history as an academic publisher. I walked into the building and checked in at a security desk. I was handed a visitor badge and directed to their office suite on the top floor. When I got out of the elevator, there was only one door to enter, so I opened it and walked into a busy office with an empty reception desk. I waited for someone to come greet me, and about a minute later, a skinny, tiny Latino woman came back to the desk and brought me into a conference room. I was the only one there. "They'll be here soon. Do you want something to drink?" she asked me when she noticed I was confused. While she went to get me a bottle of water, I pulled out my tablet and pulled up my portfolio. As I got comfortable, I looked around the conference room. It was a state-of-the-art space with chargers in the middle of the table, a camera mounted under the television, speakers embedded into the wall, and a microphone set up in the middle of the table. I saw on the television screensaver was information about connecting devices to display over Wi-Fi. I followed the directions and connected my tablet so we could look through my work. I could see the office working through the glass walls of the conference room. People would walk by and smile or wave at me. It felt like a friendly, relaxed environment. When a couple walked toward the room, I knew the interview was officially beginning. She was clearly Emma. Her brown hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore a black and white polka-dot dress. The man, I assumed, was her partner Ted. He was past middle age, but walked a step behind her. She held the door open for him before they both welcomed me to their offices. "I'm so glad you were able to come out to California to chat with us," Ted said when we were settled. "I'm fascinated by your background. How does someone go from a bachelor's in political science to an MFA?" I thought about how much to answer. I wanted to be fair to my mother, but to be clear that I had a passion and talent for graphic design. I grew up in both worlds. My father is a classical musician, so art and music were an important part of my childhood. I watched my mother climb the ranks of academic administration at different universities before she became president of a small liberal arts university in Massachusetts. "Lackawanna State?" Emma asked. "Yes," I continued, turning my attention to her. The pressure to live up to her expectations was higher than that from my father. He simply wanted me to be happy but never really gave me a path to happiness. My mother had a path but didn't really care about happiness. Emma chuckled to herself as she met Ted's eyes. I suspected this was something she has experienced, and he had observed. I continued, "It was easy to follow her path since it was all planned out, but I was never comfortable in my position. I took graphic design and art classes as electives. I considered changing my major, but I would have added another year and a half of work. I kept the poli-sci major, minored in graphic design, and then immediately enrolled in an MFA program to pursue my passion." "How did you get into book cover design?" Ted asked. I took my time with this answer. I was surprised that Ted was taking the lead with the interview, but then I remembered that Emma and I had already discussed some of these things in a less direct way. This was his interview more than hers. By accident, I said, making eye contact with him again. I started working for clubs on campus at Lackack State, and the literary magazine asked me to design their cover. I think they did it to impress my mother, but I saw the opportunity. I love to read and hate the adage that you can't judge a book by its cover. Why not? The cover design should be part of the overall marketing plan. I started doing some research about modern cover design and creating pre-made covers to make some extra money while I got my MFA. The interview continued with general interview questions about my strengths, my ability to work with a team, and a review of my portfolio. We talked about my approach to graphic design for book covers for longer than I expected. After an hour together, which passed quicker than I realized, I had the chance to ask my questions. My mother was impressed when I told her about this interview because of the company's history in academic publishing, I said, directing my question to Ted. Clearly, the company is heading in a different direction with more popular titles. Where is the company heading in the future? I watched as Ted smiled at me but turned to Emma for the answer. We have just begun our strategic planning process for the next 5 years, Emma said, taking the cue quickly. We need to consider retirements and changes within the industry. The big publishers are consolidating, smaller publishers come and go in months. Self-publishing is increasingly popular as the big retailers open options to these authors. We're looking at hybrid publishing models where we offer our editing, graphic, and marketing services to indie authors for a fee. We're careful to not venture into the world of vanity publishing with this since it would be effortless to go in that direction. We're also looking at changes to ebook publishing in general. We're considering acquiring a company that does augmented book publishing, layering in other content to the ebooks they publish. Both these could increase the work our graphic designers do. It would create opportunities beyond book cover design. We're already expanding our publication to collaborative projects. For example, our popular young adult series would benefit from graphic novels, coloring books, and other merchandising options, Ted said. If you were interested, you could work with those authors and artists. We're also moving into crafting non-fiction books. We recently published Jack Dreyfus' first cookbook and are looking for more opportunities, Emma said, picking up the conversation. I was impressed by the way they worked together. Neither talking over the other, but able to build on what they were saying. If you're interested in publishing knitting books, I know the Woodhouse family and have a friend who works for them, I said, not thinking before I spoke. Emma tilted her head. I had said something she hadn't expected. I didn't realize you knew them. They are based in the town of Lackack. Their flagship store is there, and they have been big investors in the university since before World War II. My mother often works with them, I said, but thought about Amelia's position with the family. My friend works for their family's foundation and is friends with Carrie Woodhouse, who is very involved in the fiber community around the country. She knows pattern designers, and they've been talking about self-publishing a book. I suspect it's because they don't have any connections in publishing. Emma and Ted shared a look before they both turned back to me with a smile. I didn't say anything, but that was because I could see the receptionist walking toward the room and tall, thin Frederick Wentworth walk past her with a little girl in his arms. The child waved at people as her father passed desks. I could see people waving back at her with smiles on their faces. Emma, the receptionist said, poking her head into the room. Your lunch meeting has arrived. Ted laughed. If you get the job, you'll have to get used to Emma's lunch meetings. They often involve a toddler running around the office. I smiled at the thought of spending any time around someone famous. Let me walk you out, Ted said as they both got up from the table. I quickly packed up my tablet and followed Ted as he led me to the exit. How many other people are you interviewing? I asked him once we were back at reception. Not many, he said, turning to face me. I suspect you'll hear from us soon. I smiled and shook his hand before walking out. Within 2 hours, I had a phone call to let me know they'd like to hire me and a contract in my email. Career Day. It's weird, staring at a screen, talking to young women who were technically my sorority sisters about career options while being in my home office. I had been using this space, with Ethan, for 6 months already. Kaylee, a senior and Phi Alpha Pi sorority member at Lackawanna State, my alma mater, had approached me in the winter to do this, but the pandemic had canceled everything. I can't believe I fell in love with someone in a sorority, Ethan said as he played with the ring light. He and Hannah were having fun, making sure this looked somewhat professional. I don't know how you missed it, I said, touching up my makeup. My sorority stuff is mixed in with my Northanger stuff. We'd learned a lot about each other, stuck in the apartment for the past 2 months, and only spending time with Hannah while we socially distanced from everyone else. It wasn't that Ethan was upset about my having been in a sorority. It was another example of how different we were beyond our love for Northanger parks. I had teased him by buying him a sorority-branded keychain that he had hidden in his desk. It's not like it's foreign to you, Hannah added. I was in a sorority, just a different one. I smirked at Ethan, who chuckled like he always did. It's different in New England than in the South, I said. We don't have houses where we all live and host big parties. Right, you have a cute office and volunteer around your community, Ethan said, parroting the things I had told him in the past. There were, 10 members when I was an undergraduate, I said. It's not that popular. I used it to make friends. Ethan nodded while I looked at the screen again, making sure the background looked the way I wanted. Hannah thought I should have a balance of sorority and Northanger Parks items. I made sure to put a picture in the background of Ethan and me in the parks. I knew my audience, and my boyfriend's YouTube celebrity status had come up in planning discussions. He wasn't going to sit in the room while I spoke. He had his own work to do. Hannah was going to stay to help with any tech problems. I wanted to give them kitty ears when I planned to speak at the school, I told Hannah once Ethan left. You could mail them to the office, she suggested, adjusting the position of my camera again. Nobody's on campus to pick them up. Maybe I will if they go back to campus in the fall, I said with a small sigh. It's not often that we have a claim to fame. Kaylee, the president of Lackawanna State's chapter, said to the 10 other women on the screen. Many members will go on to do important work as teachers, nurses, or working for tech companies changing the world. Katie is the only one who works for one of the world's largest conglomerates on an executive path. I blushed as Kaylee continued introducing me, explaining my educational background and the bio I had provided. It did mention that a chance meeting with Diana Northanger got me a boost with the company. I had left out the entire story that might glorify some of my impulsive decisions that were problematic. Thank you, Kaylee, I said when she was done. I could see the other women clapping even though they were on mute. I only had a few minutes of planned material, knowing they'd want to ask questions. I talked about my degree. Both my bachelor's and master's degrees came from Lackawanna State. I spoke about the work I did and how it changes with each project I complete. How did you get the job? Did you just apply? One of the women asked as soon as I was done. She had raised her hand and unmuted herself before I had completed the last word I spoke. That's a great question, I said, giving myself a few seconds to think. Because of my final project for my master's degree, I was able to meet someone doing the work I wanted to do for the park. News about the project spread to her boss and up the chain of command. Many project managers saw my final project when I was done, and it impressed them. "How did you meet this person?" another woman asked. I smiled and chuckled. This story wasn't a secret, but I didn't want to encourage these women to do something similar. I said yes to an opportunity, but I think most of you know that story already. If you don't, then ask your sisters to show you the YouTube videos. Many giggled, and I saw a flurry of YouTube links show up in the chat box. "Would you suggest doing the Northanger College program?" a third woman asked, timidly raising her hand. I thought about this and tried to answer fairly. I don't work with this program since we're looking for people who meet specific criteria, but it's a good way to get into the company if you want to work in the parks. Do you know what you want to do in the parks already? The woman shook her head. Anything really. I just want to work for Northanger Parks. I smiled, having heard this from so many people. The people who do the best are those who can narrow down their options and seek the experience that helps them get where they want. The women nodded, and I could see a few taking notes. A good example is those in culinary programs, I said, intrigued at how many were interested in this topic. They get moved around to different restaurants over the semester or summer. They get to work in at least 3 different ones before the session is over. People who are getting degrees in hospitality get a lot of experience working in hotels and managing conventions or events. I heard a rumor that the living arrangements are difficult, another woman asked without raising her hand. I nodded, having heard the stories firsthand. Think of when you first lived on your own with roommates, like your first few months in the dorm, I said, and watched many of them look off as if remembering. Now, add in being far from home and the important relationships, bonus points for those in a different country where they may struggle with the language. People get depressed really quickly. It can be a problem when you're sharing a room or living spaces. I took a deep breath and exhaled, hoping they understood that the college program wasn't always pleasant but worth the experience. If you want to do this, I highly encourage you, but think about what you want to do in the parks. Many of the women nodded. There were a few other questions about upcoming changes to the park, how my sorority experiences helped me, and what it was like working on projects. I loved sharing my stories, especially about what Phi Alpha Pi was like a few years ago when I had been an active member. "Thank you so much for talking with us," Kaylee said after everyone had left the meeting. "You were the most popular of our speakers." Some alumni wanted to attend. I laughed, wondering if any had been from the 4 years I was an active member. "It's my pleasure. I just wish I could have come to the office for it." We had been planning a trip back north just before the pandemic started. "I suspect they'll want you to come every year. They hoped Ethan would be on camera with you." I couldn't convince them otherwise. I laughed, thinking that they may have met him if we had done this in person. "Maybe next year, if you're back on campus, we'll come up and they can meet him. Plus, I'll bring some Northanger freebies." Once I was off the computer, I went to my stash of Northanger kitty ears and picked a pair of unique, staff-only ears and packed them up for Kaylee. Since she was a senior, even if I did get to campus in the fall, she would be gone. She had done so much work setting this up, mid-pandemic, that I didn't want her to miss out. Ethan found some other little pins and items in his desk that I let him add to the box. I left for the post office, the box next to me and mask ready to go, feeling like I might just see one of these women in a staff lounge someday.